Hello, ladies. We're live again. For some reason, the camera, it wouldn't allow me to load my camera. I had to unplug everything and plug it all back in again, and now it's all working. Tried to do it this morning on the challenge live and couldn't figure it out in time. Had to do a backdoor job, but now I know unplug and plug it back in. There was nothing I was doing wrong. Ladies. So I want to talk about something today that I hear about constantly in clinic and almost never hear it being spoken about publicly. There's a menopause symptom many women are quietly suffering through, and often nobody has properly explained what's actually happening. A pattern I have observed repeatedly that stops me in my tracks each time. What I find is many women think they just keep getting UTIs or urinary tract infections, or think that, what's happening down there is just getting old, part of getting older, or they quietly start adapting their life around the symptoms that they feel, the symptoms they feel embarrassed to talk about. And I want to open that conversation. This all creates a vicious cycle because women feel some discomfort. They might go to the GP. The GP says, oh, it sounds like a UTI, urinary tract infection. Here's some antibiotics. That goes on repeatedly. They get candida a lot, more discomfort, antifungal creams, more UTI-like symptoms, more antibiotics, despite clear urine tests. And that's why I say it stops me in my tracks, because women come in, they go, oh, I've had so many urinary tract infections lately. And I'm like, are they actually urinary tract infections? Did they grow a culture? Did it show anything? And the answer is always predominantly no. So often women will say things like, oh, things just don't feel the same anymore. That might mean irritation, dryness, burning, bladder urgency, discomfort, recurrent urinary symptoms, discomfort with intimacy, waking overnight needing to go to the toilet more often. And some women start carrying liners everywhere. Some map out bathrooms before leaving the house. You're on their route that they, where can I stop if I have to? Some stop wearing certain clothes because they feel uncomfortable or irritating. Some quietly avoid intimacy because they're worried things might hurt or might get triggered, like another UTI or bleeding or create fissures, small tears. And many women don't even realize these symptoms can be connected. They just feel like their body has suddenly changed overnight. And because nobody really talks about this properly, women often stay silent for years. And in my experience, I remember noticing things felt different and thinking, is this just what happens now? And I'm a naturopath. I knew what was happening physiologically, and I still had a moment of, oh, this is actually real. When I became ill, I was given medication for my symptoms. I did have 3 concurrent viruses with compounding complications, and I thought, if I thought it had disrupted my microbiome, creating yeast overgrowth. So try the antifungal cream, to no avail. So the cycle again, began until I realized it was actually a lack of estrogen causing a decline in tissue, aka vaginal atrophy. Lovely name, isn't it? I just thought of something else too. One thing you always should have checked, ladies, is lichen sclerosis. Just thought of that then. So lichen sclerosis can cause very similar symptoms, but it's caused by different reasons. Same symptoms, different cause. You need to get that differential diagnosis. Okay, so the other thing I notice in clinic is how quickly women blame themselves for these changes. They think, Maybe it's just aging. Maybe it's just what happens now. Maybe it is incontinence. Oh, great. Maybe it's bladder prolapse. Maybe it's a lack of hygiene. And then they use harsh soaps, which are drying and make things worse. I even heard of one lady using tea tree oil directly. I mean, how harsh that would burn. Right. And underneath that is often embarrassment, frustration, confusion, fear of intimacy, loss of confidence, feeling disconnected from the body, your own body, and not feeling feminine anymore. I also see women becoming hyper aware of symptoms, always scanning. Do I have another infection? Why am I uncomfortable again? Why does my body suddenly feel so different? And over time, women quietly adapt around these symptoms instead of understanding what's actually happening. And here's what I want you to understand. Women are whole systems, not isolated symptoms. And the body is often telling one story through many symptoms. What we're talking about today has a name. What we're talking about is called GSM, Genitourinary Syndrome of Menopause. And despite the complicated name, it's actually really common and it gets worse. Sorry, it does. Because I was also just thinking about a podcast I was listening to last week, and they were talking about the statistics in nursing homes when they're not treated. And then they're using, incontinence pads and getting infections. And it's not necessary to have to suffer like that, basically. Because as estrogen declines in menopause, the tissues of the vulva, the vagina, the urethra, and the bladder become thinner, drier, less elastic, and more fragile. That's what vaginal atrophy is. And it's not just the vagina, it's also the vulva, it's also the clitoris. So this isn't just dryness. These are hormonal tissues that is changing that can affect comfort, bladder symptoms, lubrication, irritation, urinary urgency, and that recurrent UTI-like symptom. And as I say, intimacy as well. And one thing women are often told is the bladder and the vaginal tissues are closely connected. So they're not told this often enough, that the vagina and the bladder tissue are connected hormonally, right, which is why the symptoms overlap. So some women think it's just the vagina, don't understand or don't know or haven't been told how it affects the bladder and urethra as well, which is why this UTI-like symptom picture begins. Right? So you don't need a medical degree to understand this. We understand that hormones affect skin, hair, joints, mood, but women are rarely told these tissues, right, are hormone responsive too. As estrogen declines, as I say, the tissue becomes thinner, lubrication reduces, sensitivity increases, and the tissues become more vulnerable to irritation and discomfort. That is why women suddenly feel something feels different, because biologically it has changed. We understand that skin changes with age and hormones, but women are rarely told that the tissues, as I said, the tissues of the vulva, vagina, bladder, and urethra change in response to hormones too. And suddenly so many symptoms start to make sense when you realize that. One thing I see over and over are women who have had repeated rounds of antibiotics for UTIs, but their urine tests aren't always clearly showing an infection, or the symptoms keep returning. And meanwhile, nobody has explained that hormonal changes right, can create all those symptoms that I've read out, right? And bladder symptoms mimic infection. So if you think about it, those of you who've had a UTI, right, and you felt that burning, that urgency, the irritation, the discomfort, right, that's what it feels like when it's vaginal atrophy. So I see women who, stop exercising. They might stop exercising because it's uncomfortable. They avoid intimacy. They worry constantly about their symptoms or quietly tolerate discomfort because they think it's just a part of getting older. And honestly, these women are not asking for miracles. What do we want, ladies? We want comfort. We want confidence. We want answers. We want reassurance and to feel at home in your body again. Most of all, we want someone to finally take us seriously when we have, and not make it any more difficult than what it is. The first thing I want you to hear is this: please stop dismissing your symptoms. Your body is not betraying you. It's responding to hormonal tissue changes, and there is support available. Vaginal moisturizers, good hydration, avoiding fragmented products, pelvic floor support, nourishment. These are all starting points. But more than anything, I want women to seek support early rather than normalizing discomfort for years. And I mean years. I've spoken to women who have suffered for 10 years or more. A few helpful questions for your GP if you're in this cycle is, if they say it could be UTI, ask them, could it be GSM? Could these symptoms be hormonal issue changes rather than repeated infection? What treatment options are available? And would vaginal estrogen or pelvic floor support be appropriate for me? Women deserve informed conversations here, not dismissal. So those questions again, if the GP says this could be a UTI, I'm going to pop you on some antibiotics and see how you go. Say, could it be GSM? Could these symptoms be hormonal changes? What treatment options are there? And would vaginal estrogen or pelvic floor support be helpful? Because ladies, unfortunately, GSM usually doesn't disappear on its own. Women often slowly adapt around the worsening symptoms: more discomfort, more avoidance, more anxiety, more disconnection from intimacy and confidence. And sometimes years pass before somebody finally explains what's actually happening. So ladies, I'd like to normalize this as in, let's share. I'd love to know, has anybody properly explained this to you before? And if today's conversation has made you think, I need someone to look at my whole picture properly, that's why I offer the health clarity calls. 15 minutes with me, one-on-one. I'll tell you what I think is going on and what I think the next best step for you might look like. So send me a DM if you wanted to book one of those calls. I allocate a couple every week. Some of them have gone because of the people in the challenge that have booked their reset calls. So let me know if you want to have a chat. And if you've been navigating this quietly for a long time, or for long enough, you've realized, I don't need to keep doing it this way. I don't need to keep suffering, right? If you've been struggling with repeated UTIs that keep coming back, please ask your GP about GSM. It may not be an infection at all. It may be hormonal tissue changes that nobody has named for you yet. Hope this has been helpful. Hope that you now understand the what and the why a bit more, okay, and know that there's things within your power that you can change to support yourself. Okay, bye for now.